Midnight, in the California desert. 65,000 people are looking at the exact same stage. And depending on where they are standing, they are not watching the same show. Above the crowd, 100 feet tall, a woman made of light spreads a pair of wings that stretch wider than the stage itself. She is glowing. She is enormous. For a few seconds, half the internet is convinced Coachella just broke the laws of physics. Except, here is the thing. If you were actually standing in that crowd, you saw none of it. Not a flicker. Not a shadow. Nothing. So how does a 100-foot version of a global pop star go viral to millions of people online while remaining completely invisible to the tens of thousands standing right in front of her? That is not a trick question. It has a real answer, and it is stranger than you think. If you are new here, welcome. This channel exists for exactly this kind of moment, where pop culture and technology collide, and we do not stop digging until we can actually explain how the trick was done. And this is a genuinely good trick. In April 2026, Blackpink's Lisa walked out during EDM producer Anyma's headline set at Coachella to debut their new collaboration, Bad Angel. For the people physically standing in Indio's Empire Polo Club that night, it was already a massive moment. A K-pop megastar was sharing a stage with one of electronic music's most technically ambitious live artists. But for the millions watching the official YouTube livestream, it was something entirely different. For a few minutes, a live concert stopped behaving like a live concert at all. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what that towering Lisa figure actually was, why the people who paid real money to be there in person never saw it, and why one performance turned into a genuinely heated argument about what the word live even means anymore. Stick with me, because the short answer, it is a hologram, is actually wrong. Figuring out why it is wrong is the most interesting part. But first, you need to understand exactly what Anyma was building at Coachella in the first place, because this was not some last-minute gimmick. This was the plan, all along. 1. Context. Let us back up. Anyma, whose real name is Matteo Milleri, is not a typical Coachella booking. He is an Italian-American producer who built his name on melodic techno and some of the most elaborate visual productions in electronic music. His shows are built around massive humanoid figures, surreal digital landscapes, and stagecraft that blurs the line between a concert and a video game. Around this time, he had also become one of the first electronic artists to headline an extended residency at Sphere in Las Vegas, the venue famous for wrapping its audience in a fully immersive screen. So when Anyma landed a headline slot at Coachella 2026, the expectation was not simply a big DJ set. The expectation was that whatever he was planning, it was going to be a spectacle. The project was called Aeden, a new audiovisual world blending ancient, almost mythological imagery with hyper-modern digital effects. Crumbling marble columns stood next to glowing cybernetic figures. Human and machine collided on purpose and by design. Here is where it gets messy, though. Aeden was actually supposed to debut during Coachella's first weekend. It did not happen. High winds tore through the festival grounds and forced organizers to cancel the full production. Anyma ended up playing a scaled-back, stripped-down set at a smaller stage instead. There were no towering visuals, no elaborate build, and none of what fans had been expecting. Which meant that by the time Weekend 2 arrived, there was an entire internet's worth of pent-up anticipation waiting to see what Aeden actually was. And that is exactly when Bad Angel entered the picture. Just days before his rescheduled performance, Anyma and Lisa released their collaborative single, a moody, cinematic techno-pop track that arrived alongside a music video placing Lisa inside Anyma's visual universe. She played an alter ego who was part human, part angel, and part machine, walking through the wreckage of a collapsing digital world. The pairing made sense on paper. Lisa had spent the past couple of years deliberately stepping outside the traditional K-pop lane, with solo releases, an acting role, and red carpet moments that had nothing to do with Blackpink. Anyma, meanwhile, had spent years building a reputation as the artist pushing live visuals further than almost anyone else in dance music. Put those two together, and you had one of the most talked-about collaborations of the year before a single note was played live. So the song was already a hit. The visuals were already stunning. What could Anyma possibly do at Coachella to top that? It turned out he did not need to top it. He needed to break the rules of what watching a concert even means. And that is where things get strange. The moment. Friday night, Weekend 2. Coachella's main stage, well past midnight. The Aeden show had already been building towards something enormous. Massive digital structures appeared to crumble into the crowd, while the stage looked more like a rendered environment than a physical space. Guests had already come and gone throughout the set, as part of the surprise-heavy format Anyma had built for the night. But everyone already knew who the biggest name on that list was going to be. Lisa walked out in a shimmering, almost translucent look, while imagery of her own alter ego glowed on the screen behind her. She moved down the stage runway as Bad Angel began. For the tens of thousands of people physically standing in that crowd, this was already a massive moment. A global pop star was standing just a few feet away from them, performing a brand new song publicly for the very first time. That part was completely real. There were no effects and no tricks. It was simply Lisa, on a stage, in front of a crowd that had been waiting all night to see her. Here is where the concert splits into two different shows. At that exact moment, on the official YouTube livestream, viewers watching from home saw something the crowd never did. Above the stage, not on a screen but seemingly hovering in open air, a second Lisa appeared. She was hyper-realistic and impossibly tall. Wings spread against the night sky, dwarfing the entire stage below her. To anyone scrolling through their phone that night, it looked like Coachella had quietly invented a new kind of hologram. Clips of the moment spread almost instantly. There were slowed-down replays, reaction videos, and people insisting it had to have been added afterward in editing, because nothing that large should be possible to broadcast live in real time without a visible seam. So which was it? Was this real? Was it computer-generated imagery stitched in after the fact? Or was it something else entirely? Here is the part that made this genuinely go viral. It was not fake. It was also not added afterward. It happened live in real time, exactly as broadcast for one very specific audience. And here is where it gets even more interesting. While all of this was unfolding online, with clips spreading, shock reactions appearing, and comments asking how it was even possible, something completely different was happening just a few hundred feet away from where that giant figure appeared to be standing. Nothing. The tens of thousands of people who bought tickets and stood in that crowd for hours to get close to the stage never saw the giant Lisa at all. She was not blurred. She was not distant. She was not visible for even a second. As far as their eyes were concerned, Lisa was one performer at normal human height on a stage. That was the entire show. 3. The twist and investigation. This is the part of the story where things become genuinely interesting. Once fans in the actual crowd started comparing notes with viewers watching at home, the mismatch became obvious very quickly. People who had been standing right at the barricade posted confused reactions online. They essentially said they had no idea what everyone was talking about because nothing like that had appeared above the stage in person. Meanwhile, people watching from their couches insisted it was one of the most jaw-dropping visual moments in festival history. So who was telling the truth? Both of them. That is the actual answer. Neither group was lying about what they experienced, because they were not really watching the same event. Here is where we get technical, but I promise it is not complicated. What appeared above the stage was not, strictly speaking, a hologram. That word gets used constantly, but a true hologram is a physical projection. It is light bouncing off something real and visible to people in the room from different angles. Think of old-school Pepper's ghost-style stage illusions, or the giant, hyper-realistic projection shows that electronic artist Eric Prydz has spent close to 2 decades refining on his tours. Those productions are visible live and in person to the crowd standing in the room. What happened with Lisa at Coachella was something else. It was augmented reality, or AR. And the difference matters more than it sounds. Instead of projecting a physical image into real space, the production team created a digital 3D figure, the giant Lisa, and layered her directly onto the video feed coming from the broadcast cameras in real time. The cameras filming the show for the live stream were fitted with tracking hardware that constantly reported their exact position and angle. That tracking data fed into rendering software. The software calculated, frame by frame, exactly where the digital Lisa needed to appear relative to what that specific camera was seeing. Then the figure was composited directly into the footage before it reached YouTube. To the camera, and to everyone watching through it, she was really there. To the naked eye, standing in the desert and looking at an empty patch of night sky, there was nothing to see at all. And here is the part that makes this even more interesting. This was not Coachella's first time using this exact technique. Years earlier, the festival's livestream had already experimented with the same broadcast-only augmented reality method. Giant digital imagery appeared above a completely different artist set, invisible to the in-person crowd in exactly the same way it was with Lisa. Anyma and Lisa were not inventing the technique from scratch. They were taking a tool the festival had quietly been refining and pointing it at one of the biggest pop collaborations of the year, at a scale nobody had used it at before. That is exactly why it worked so well. Once people understood what had actually happened, the debate did not die down. It became even bigger. The conversation was no longer just about how they did it. It became a debate about whether this was actually acceptable. Some fans argued that it was brilliant. They saw it as a genuinely new way to reward people watching from home, especially those who would never be able to afford an expensive festival ticket. For those viewers, the livestream offered something the in-person crowd simply could not experience. Others felt it was almost the opposite of what a live show was supposed to be. They saw it as a live moment that only a fraction of the actual audience was ever allowed to witness, dressed up to look spontaneous for millions of strangers scrolling online. If a 100-foot version of an artist appears during a live show, but almost nobody in the building can actually see her, was that really a live moment at all? Or was it a broadcast effect wearing a live show as a costume? There is no clean answer to that. And that is exactly why the clips kept spreading. 4. The payoff. Let us talk numbers for a moment, because they tell their own version of this story. The official Bad Angel music video was already attracting serious traffic before Coachella even happened. It reportedly passed several million views within its first couple of days online, according to outlets covering the release. By the time Anyma's rescheduled set took place just over a week later, the video's view count had reportedly climbed well past 9 million, according to Billboard's coverage at the time. And that was before factoring in the wave of clips, reaction videos, and debate threads that came directly out of the performance itself. Content that goes viral is almost impossible to measure completely. Whatever the number is by the time you are watching this, it is almost certainly higher than it was during that first week. But the more interesting payoff is not the view count. It is what this performance signals about the future of live production. Coachella had been experimenting with broadcast-exclusive augmented reality for a few years by that point. Most of those moments were smaller and treated as novelties for the livestream audience. What made the Lisa and Anyma moment different was its scale. This was not a subtle background effect. It was arguably the single biggest visual moment of the entire set, built specifically for an audience that was not even in the room. And that puts this performance in a strange kind of company. Eric Prydz has spent the better part of 2 decades chasing giant, hyper-realistic visuals through his touring shows. But crucially, those visuals are built to be seen live by the actual crowd standing in front of him. Anyma's own Sphere residency in Las Vegas moves in the opposite direction. It wraps the physical audience in an environment so immersive that everyone in the room sees the same overwhelming spectacle at once. Lisa's giant Coachella moment sits somewhere between those two ideas, and it also contradicts both of them. It was not built for the room at all. It was built for the rectangle in your hand. So, is this the future? Are concerts going to be designed to look better on your phone than they do in person? If artists and festivals continue moving in this direction, an in-person ticket might increasingly buy you proximity and atmosphere, while the free live stream gives you the actual spectacle. That is a strange trade to consider. And judging by how quickly this particular moment spread, it is a trade that many people online seem more than willing to make, at least as viewers. So, here is where that leaves us. 65,000 people stood in the California desert and watched Lisa perform Bad Angel for the first time, live and in person, only a few feet away from them. That part was completely real. At the exact same moment, millions of people somewhere else watched a 100-foot-tall version of her spread glowing wings across the night sky. For the people actually standing there, that moment simply never happened. Both of those things are true. Neither audience was lied to. They just were not watching the same concert anymore. And maybe that is the real story here. It is not the augmented reality. It is not the viral clips. It is not even Lisa or Anyma specifically. It is that the word live does not mean what it used to mean. Increasingly, which version of live you receive depends entirely on which screen you are looking through. The crowd got the concert. The internet got the illusion. And somehow, everyone walked away convinced they had seen the real thing. If you were watching that night, I want to know which side you were on. Were you part of the group that thought this was the coolest use of technology you had ever seen? Or did it feel like the people who actually paid to be there were being shortchanged? Write your opinion in the comments, because this moment genuinely split people down the middle.